future's now, old man.
Time for a new age of item lock. Hey everyone, it's me Joji, and today we're going to be taking a look at a new Scarlet and Violet deck. Now there are a bunch of cards staying that are very powerful like Lost Box, Lugia, and even Giratina V-Star, but in these videos I want to focus on decks that use the newer cards mostly. And so today's video is going to be on Banette EX. This card is the latest card for item lock, and some of you veteran players may recognize this card's attack as being Seismitoad's EX attack. Similar to Quaking Punch, Banette EX's Eternal Darkness does 30 damage and your opponent can't play any item cards during their next turn. And as anyone that has played Pokemon TCG knows, that item cards are very important for setting up their field and their Pokemon. But unlike obviously Seismitoad EX, this is an evolution Pokemon, so there are going to be some caveats, not as good as the original Seismitoad EX, but let's see if it can live up to the hype that was Seismitoad EX and its Quaking Punch. Okay, so jumping straight into it, we are going to be running a 2-2 line for the Shuffit Banette EX. And again, this is an evolution Pokemon, so you need to have the Shuffits in order to evolve into Banette EX. But as I mentioned, this Banette EX is going to have Eternal Darkness as its attack. Again, only doing 30 damage, but again, your opponent can't play any item cards their next turn. And you can couple that with its other attack, Poltergeist, which is very reminiscent of the Gengar Mimikyu's attack of the similar effect, where it does more damage for each of the trainer cards in your opponent's hands. And since they couldn't play any item cards, those are considered trainer cards. And so it does 60 times the amount of trainer cards in their hand to their active Pokemon. And so I think this might do pretty well in tournament play. I would probably set this in maybe tier 2 or tier 3 as it currently stands with the cards we're getting. Speaking of cards we are getting quite an interesting line here with the new Gardevoir EX. I'll throw up the English translations on the screen, but this is another evolution Pokemon, but it is a stage 2, and so it's going to be a little bit difficult to get to it, but we'll find ways to make this even better of a line, as you'll see in a second. But of course, let's take a look at this card's ability. Now, Psychic Embrace lets you put basic energy from your discard onto any of your Pokemon, but you have to put 2 damage counters onto the Pokemon that you attach to. But of course, this is as often as you like during your turn. And of course, it does have an attack, Miracle Force, but 190 damage isn't going to be that great. But what's really great, as we mentioned, it is a stage 2, so you have to evolve to it. And the great part about this Gardevoir line is there's a bunch of other cards that you can evolve into instead of this Gardevoir EX, such as the Shining Arcana Gardevoir here, which lets you draw 2 cards, and if any of them are basic energy, you can attach them to your Pokemon, so you don't have to worry about the damage counters from the EX version. But if they're not energy cards, you do put them into your hand. And of course, Gardevoir EX is not the only version that it can evolve into. It can of course evolve into a Gallade, and this one has Buddy Catch, which sort of like the Gardevoir EX, it lets you draw, but you get to choose a supporter. And so this makes it very beneficial if you instead maybe you're running into a different item lock and you can't use item cards. This Buddy Catch lets you draw into something that you could maybe use instead. And since of course these need to evolve from something, we are going to be running a 3-1 version of Kirlia. Now we do have the refinement version, which essentially you discard a card and you get to draw 2. And then we also have this Miracle Step Kirlia. This one lets you set up other Kirlia onto the bench. So it's really good to maybe set this one up first, attack with it to get the other 3. Maybe you'll get a knockout on this one, but then you don't have to worry about it because you have 3 others to carry the rest of the game. And of course, those Kirlias need something to evolve from, so we are running 4 routes. Now this is the memory skip version, which disables one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. So if the Pokemon only has 1 attack, it can't do anything. There is a different version that the list I based this off of runs. It's the Chilling Rain version, but I do prefer this attack here, Memory Skip, instead. And rounding out our Pokemon, we have a Radiant Greninja to discard some of that Psychic, so the Gardevoir EX could put it onto our Pokemon. And because we are running very weak Pokemon here, we want to make sure that our setup isn't disrupted by some kind of attacks that hit the bench. So we're going to be running a Manaphy. Ideally, we can get something that stops damage counters as well, but as long as we can maybe stop a knockout or two from maybe even an opposing Radiant Greninja, this is very helpful. Okay, let's move on to our supporters for the deck. We are going to be running a 4-line of Professor's Research for draw support, and again, we're not too concerned with discarding some of these cards. We have so many Pokemon that we don't have to worry so much about discards, so Professor is perfect to run. We are running 2 Judge. This is becoming very popular. It is getting a reprint, so you don't have to use the ones from, let's say this one's Fusion Strike or even earlier, but a good way to disrupt your opponent's hand, especially since Marnie is rotating out. We are running 2 Boss's Orders, so we can boss up maybe something that's not powered up and we can lock it into place. That way they can't switch with maybe a switch card, switch, or escape rope. We are also running, as I mentioned, these are very weak, and maybe you'll have to discard some of the other cards in your deck. We are running a Miriam. Now this is a new card that's coming out, and I'll show the English translations on the screen now. But basically what it does is you get to choose 5 Pokemon from your discard pile and then put them back into your deck, and then draw 3. Not the ones that you just put in, but obviously just 3 cards from the top of your deck. So maybe you could actually get back the card you just put in from the discard after shuffling. And finally, rounding it out, we have a Cheryl for healing, of course, because if we do get damaged, we don't want to get knocked out as easily. It is at 250 HP, so it is an evolution as well, and only needs 1 energy to get powered up. So Cheryl's perfect in this deck. I may even consider running this with 2 Cheryl. We'll see how it does in the early on meta, if this changes whether or not we're going to add more Cheryls. Okay, moving on to our item cards. We're going to be running 4 battle VIP passes because we have a lot of basic Pokemon here, and we can either set up the Shuffits, the Routes, Manaphy, or Greninja with it. We are also running, because they are low HP Pokemon, 4 level balls. That way we can get, again, Routes or Shuffits out onto the field, or I guess maybe Manaphy if we really need it. We are running 2 Fog Crystals. They're mostly going to be used to grab Psychic Energy if you really need it. And again, you can use the level balls or the battle VIP passes to get the Routes or Shuffits. So I would stick to using these for energy if you really need it. We also have 3 Ultra Ball because we need a way to get some of our evolution Pokemon out. There are some decks that are running Capturing Aroma to get your evolution Pokemon, but again, that's a flip of a coin. So I'd stick to just using the Ultra Ball since you can discard Pokemon just fine without worry. We also have 2 rare candies to evolve things like our Gardevoir EX from Routes if we need to get straight into the EX, or maybe into the Shining Arcana or the Glade. And then rounding out our last item is a Pal Pad, because as you saw, we're not heavy on the supporters. So if we need to put back a Miriam, a Cheryl, maybe even a boss, we can use this Pal Pad. Now, as for our Poke Tools and Stadiums, we are running Vitality Bands, which are getting a reprint. And the reason we run the Vitality Bands instead of something like a Choice Belt is because this lets you do 10 damage to all types of Pokemon. If you remember, Choice Belt only does 30 more damage to V Pokemon. And of course, this is going to let you do damage to the EX Pokemon as well. We also run a single emergency jelly in case we need to heal, especially after we do a lot of damage using our counters here from the Gardevoir EX's ability. And our stadium for this deck is going to be Temple of Sinnoh, because we only run regular Psychic Energy. So this is more to get rid of some pesky Lugia decks and make it a little bit harder for them to use things like DTEs and other special energy. And rounding out for our energy, we have 10 energies to run this deck. And so this is a Banette EX deck that honestly I might try out once it's available on Pokemon TCG Live, and maybe even in person if I'm able to get the stuff quickly. As I said, this was based off a list in Japan that is doing pretty well in circuits there. The only difference that I made here right now is the routes. The routes, I like this memory skip one a lot more than the one from Chilling Reign. The Chilling Reign one does make your opponent's Pokemon confused, but just like the debuff that this one sets, it can be retreated and it will lose that effect. But if they can't retreat, this is a lot more likely for them to not be able to attack. If they flip a heads, they are going to be able to attack from confusion. And as I mentioned before, I'm thinking of maybe adding a Cheryl onto here, maybe getting rid of one of the level balls, just because I do think this may need a bit more healing. And although vitality bands are really good for doing extra damage, these Banette EXs are only at 250 HP, and that is still way under the damage that a Lugia V-Star or Giratina can do with barely being powered up. But yeah, as it stands, this is honestly probably a good, tier 2, tier 3 deck. It's not quite there at the very top, but it will make a lot of people frustrated with Eternal Darkness. But yeah, let me know what you think about this deck. Honestly, it's a good item lock deck, but it's still not there. We'll see if it does get better as more cards from Scarlet and Violet are revealed. And so I will say I am excited to try out Banette EX when it does come out, because I have been a fan of item lock for a while. I just never liked the Vikavolt version of it. But you know what? I was never lucky enough to play Pokemon TCG during the Quaking Punch era, and this is getting me very interested in trying some old retro versions of it. But if you are interested in getting some more early decks lists, we are going to be doing 2 more videos on these topics. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can get the next early deck list video we're going to make on Scarlet and Violet. Anyways guys, as always, stay safe and thanks for watching.